Thank you for joining us today for the Safety Center's March webinar. We will be getting started in just a few minutes, so if I could ask all of you who have recently joined to please take a second and fill out the poll questions along the outside right corner of the screen. Also, again, we do have a PowerPoint presentation in the center which gives just a few instructions for the best listening and viewing options for today's webinar. In the bottom center, there is a handout pod with which you can download today's PDF version of the webinar in case you'd like that for your records. And over on the left-hand side, you'll notice a chat pod. If anyone has any technical difficulties or any questions for today's speakers, please feel free to type in there at any point in time. And again, we'll get started in just another few minutes. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on which time zone that you're joining us from today. My name is Jamie Sullivan, and I am the manager for the National Center for Rural Road Safety. Thank you for joining us for today's March webinar on safety performance management. We're very excited to have presenters from both Federal Highway and NHTSA today to talk to you about this topic. As we get started, I'm going to look through the polls that have come in. It looks like we have a pretty good cross-section of the United States joining us, with the majority of you coming from the West and the Midwest. It looks like the majority of you are joining us by yourselves at your computer. However, we do have a few groups. As always, I would ask all of the groups to send us an email at info@ruralsafetycenter.org. And in that email, if you could please provide the names and email addresses of those in your group who have attended today. That is so that we can send out the surveys, which I'll describe in just a few minutes. But it's the only way that you'll be able to get a certificate of completion or a CEU. So again, if you are joining us in one of these groups, it looks like we have a few of two to three people and a few of 4 to 5. Please email us your rosters and emails at info@ruralsafetycenter.org. It also looks like we have a pretty good representation of all different organizations today. It looks like we have about 17% from the Federal Department of Transportation, about 24% from state DOT, 20 from local DOTs. We have about 7% from other federal, state, and local government agencies. We have a few of you from first response, about 14% from universities, and about 11% from consultants. So we have a great cross-section joining us today. And we do have quite a few of you joining us on both the computer and phone, but the majority of you are computer only. I will let you know that if you do have any issues hearing us through the computer, in the past those issues have generally been because of Wi-Fi signals. So if you do have any issues with the sound, please, we ask you to dial into the phone system, and that phone number is provided at the top left of your screen. I'm going to move us over to our presentation now. And we have just a few logistics to go over with you. Today's webinar will be an hour and a half long. The webinar is being recorded, and it will be archived on our website. So for quality of this recording, we have muted everyone other than our speakers. We would ask you that if you're listening on your phone, if you could please mute your computer. Otherwise, you will hear feedback with the two sounds going at the same time. To maximize today's presentation, you can click on the 4 arrows that you'll notice in the top right of your screen. That will make the PowerPoint itself full screen for you. At the end of each section that we have today, there will be time for question and answer with our speakers. But at any time that you would like, you can use the chat pod that's over on the left-hand side to put in your questions. That way you don't have to wait until the end of a section. You can type them in at any time you'd like. And when we do stop for questions, I will go back through the chat pod and ask our presenters all of the ones that have been put into the chat pod. There's also a handout pod, as I mentioned before, but you'll notice now it's on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Within that is the PDF of today's presentation, and you can download that for your records if you'd like to keep it. It will also be put on our website with the archived streaming version of today's webinar as well. And lastly, we would ask you if you wouldn't mind filling out the follow-up surveys that we do send out. There will be one that goes out directly following today's webinar. That one is to let us know information about how you liked today's webinar, if the information shared was valuable to you, asked you some questions about our webinar system itself. And then in about 3 months, we'll also send out a second survey, and that one asks more about what you did with the information that you learned today, how you've used it, whether or not you've passed it along to others within your organization, or if you have changed some types of data collection that you're doing based on today's webinar. Any of those types of examples is what we're looking at for that follow-up survey. Today's survey is the one in which there is a box for you to check whether or not you'd like a certificate of completion and or CEUs for today's webinar. This takes about 2 to 3 weeks for us to get those out to you via email after today's webinar. The certificates, the CEUs are provided by a different office at Montana State University. So when you do receive the email, it will have a form for you to fill out and return to that other office. I did want to let everyone know, for anyone who's joined us today or in previous webinars, that you will not receive an email or any communication from that office letting you know that you've been awarded them. You just will be awarded them. If you would like documentation showing how many CEUs that you have accrued, you can contact that office, which is the MSU Office of Continuing Education. And again, if you need any of that contact information, please contact us at info@ruralsafetycenter.org, and we can get you in touch with them. Today's presenters, we're lucky to have George Merritt from Federal Highway Administration and Amy Schick from NHTSA. George leads FHWA's technical assistance and deployment efforts for safety performance management and performance-based practical design. His focus is to improve the safety of the nation's highways through innovative intersection design, freeway interstate interchange design, nighttime visibility, including sign and pavement marking retroreflectivity, and roadway lighting, roadway departure roadside design, intersection design, human factors applications, and AASHTO's Highway Safety Manual. George started his career with the Indiana Department of Transportation and has been with FHWA since 2001. Amy began her career at NHTSA in 2007 as a Presidential Management Fellow. Since then, Amy served in NHTSA's Research and Program Development Office working on EMS, adult occupant protection, and distracted driving matters, and has served as a Congressional Fellow with the U.S. House Appropriations Committee. Currently, Amy works for NHTSA's Grants Management and Operations Office, providing technical assistance to states through NHTSA's 10 regional offices. In this role, Amy helps annually administer federal grants to improve core highway safety programs, under 23 U.S. Code 402, State and Community Highway Safety Grants, and 405, National Priority Safety Programs. Amy holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Emergency Health Services and a Master's of Science degree in Health Promotion. Before NHTSA, Amy worked as an EMT paramedic and served 8 years in the U.S. Army Reserve Finance Corps. Amy lives in Virginia with her husband, 4-year-old son, and 2 rescue dogs, and we're very thankful to have both of them here to speak with you guys today. The goal of today's webinar is that once you've completed this, you'll have an overview of the safety performance management requirements for state departments of transportation, Metropolitan Planning Organizations, state highway safety offices, and specifically the role of local partners in achieving compliance with these safety performance management regulations. To achieve these webinar goals, you will learn the following 4 things: to identify FHWA's safety performance management requirements, to list ways that local partners can help achieve compliance with these requirements, to identify the 3 critical roles locals play in crash reporting, and to identify behavioral highway safety performance management requirements for state highway safety offices and their impacts for a local agency audience. And to begin today's presentation, I'm going to turn it over to George now. George?
Hey, thank you, Jamie. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Very good. Well, hello, everybody. George Merritt here, Federal Highway Administration, and I appreciate your time and this opportunity for Amy and I to be able to share with all of you sort of what's kind of going on the national level, because transportation performance management, which may be somewhat new in terms of a buzzword or a topic, is not only here, but it is here in a big way. And so what I'd like to do is to walk you all through sort of what is being expected of state DOTs, and understanding that state DOTs cannot not only help to improve safety performance of our nation's highways by themselves, but they can't also comply with these regulations without the help of everybody in each state. And that includes the smallest local agency, all rural organizations, all local agencies are all going to play a role to one extent or another. So with that, I'd like to start out and give you just a quick overview of what we call TPM, or Transportation Performance Management, is, and why is it here. So the Transportation Performance Management, or what we call TPM, is a regulation that was first put out in the Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century Act, or MAP 21. That's a transportation bill that came out a number of years ago. And it is the establishment of a performance and outcome-based federal aid highway program. This transportation performance management requirement is designed to optimize the performance of our transportation systems, and specifically I'm going to be talking today about safety performance, or safety performance management. The most recent legislation was the Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act, or the FAST Act, and that has continued the concept of transportation performance management. Transportation performance management gives an opportunity for everyone on this call, hopefully, to be involved in the decisions that go into making or prioritizing the needs for safety, and collaboratively work on aligning resources and optimize system performance, and then report outcomes. In the reporting part, the transparency part, I think, is one of the big parts of transportation performance management, because it's going to require a lot of information and data, and then communication with all citizens in making this information available, which hopefully will help to motivate us to do more with safety and safety performance management. Now, transportation performance management more broadly, not safety performance management, but transportation performance management, is a strategic approach that uses system information to make investment and policy decisions so that we can achieve national performance goals. And this is pretty much the broad picture, okay? What are the elements of transportation performance management from the federal perspective? Well, there's 6 elements. The first element would be national goals. In Congress, in MAP 21, established 7 goal areas to focus the federal aid highway program. The second is measures. The U.S. Department of Transportation has established or is establishing national performance measures through the rulemaking process for states, MPOs, and transit agencies to use to assess performance in several areas and to carry out a number of performance-based programs. Safety performance measures were established in March of 2016. Targets. This is where states, MPOs, and public transportation providers will establish targets for each of the measures that I'll go over here in just a moment. Plans. States, MPOs, and public transportation providers will develop plans to document the strategies and investments that they will make to achieve performance targets. Reports. This is where states and MPOs, or Metropolitan Planning Organizations, will report on progress toward the achievement of their targets. And then accountability and transparency. This is where states are going to be held accountable to making significant progress toward the achievement of their targets. And this, by means of making it available to the public, this is where we are trying to increase transparency so that everyone can be informed of what's going on. Now, here are the national goal areas. There's 7 of them, and safety is listed first, partly because it is our highest priority at the U.S. Department of Transportation, but also because it was the first one that was completed going through the federal rulemaking process. We also have infrastructure condition, congestion reduction, system reliability, freight movement and economic vitality, environmental sustainability, and reduced project delivery delays. Now, the second element, or measures, is the second element of our TPM framework. So our performance measures, or the Federal Highway Administration's performance measures final rule, established 5 measures to carry out the Highway Safety Improvement Program, which sometimes you hear referred to as the HSIP. And these measures are the number of fatalities, the rate of fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, the number of serious injuries, the rate of serious injuries per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, and the number of non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized serious injuries combined. Each performance measure is based upon a 5-year rolling average. Now, I want to kind of quickly walk you through each one of these so that you can kind of understand what's going on at the state level, because knowing that will help you understand the role at the more local organizational level and how you may play a role in this. Now, the number of fatalities measure is calculated by adding the number of fatalities for the most recent 5-year consecutive years in which data is available and dividing by 5. So pretty simple. You got 5 years worth of data. You add them up and divide by 5, and you know what the number of fatalities measure reports. The rate of fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles of travel is calculated by calculating the number of fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles of travel, which is coming from the HPMS system, with the Highway Performance Monitoring System data set. It's another requirement that states have to provide travel information to the federal government. And it's for the most 5 recent consecutive years in which data is available, and then dividing it by 5 and rounding to the thousandth of decimal place. The number of serious injuries is the total number of persons suffering at least one serious injury in a motor vehicle crash. This is calculated by adding the number of serious injuries for the most recent 5 consecutive years in which data is available, and then dividing by 5, and this is reported to the nearest 10th decimal place. The rate of serious injuries is calculated as per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, and just like the fatality rate, it is the most 5 consecutive years and then divided by 5, and it's rounded to the nearest thousandth decimal place. And then the number of non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized serious injuries combined is basically combining these two. There's just not enough data for non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized serious injuries by itself to establish a performance measure. And so by combining these, we actually increase the data population, which allows us to have a little bit better of a sense of whether our trends are going in a positive direction, meaning going down, or in a negative direction, meaning going up. And it's divided by 5, rounded to the nearest 10th decimal place. Now, the third element in the framework that the Federal Highway Administration has for transportation performance management as it relates to safety performance management is targets. This is where the Safety Performance Measures Regulation has identified requirements for the states to establish their targets for each measure. And this is going to be delivered to the Federal Highway Administration or established as annual targets in the Highway Safety Improvement Program annual report. States must establish targets for each of those 5 performance measures beginning in August of this year. And that's going to be handled in the August HSIP annual report. They're going to be establishing calendar year 2018 targets. The targets are applicable to all public roads, regardless of functional classification or ownership. Now, depending on which state you're in, you realize the state does not have control over all public roads, regardless of functional classification or ownership. In some states, they have more mileage of the overall system. Some have less. And that's why everybody is going to play a role in trying to move safety in the right direction and helping to bring down fatalities and serious injuries. There are going to be some targets that you're going to hear Amy talk about that are more of the behavioral targets, but also on that list, there's 3 targets that are going to be in common with the Federal Highway Administration's requirements. And that's going to be the number of fatalities, the rate of fatalities, and the number of serious injuries. State DOTs can establish any number of urbanized area targets, especially for those states that have a number of different urbanized areas. But they only can establish a single non-urbanized area target for their state. And these are optional targets that will not be included when assessing target achievement, but it is something that states may elect to pursue so that they can monitor and assess both urbanized versus, say, more rural or non-urbanized safety performance. And I don't know where the states are going yet with this, but I would not be surprised if some states choose to reflect their urbanized performance separately from their non-urbanized. And the boundaries must be established and declared. Excuse me. MPOs, Metropolitan Planning Organizations, play a role in this as well because they have a hand in the planning process, obviously, and that results in projects being built. They have 180 days after the states established what are their targets to decide whether or not they want to agree to support the state targets, or they are permitted to establish their own numerical target specific only to their planning area or Metropolitan Planning Organization planning area. Their targets, if they elect to choose them, are applicable, again, to all public roads that are within the MPO area. And their VMT estimate, this is where it gets a little bit complicated if you happen to be representing an MPO here or familiar with the way that VMT data is used. They are going to have to establish their own methodology for describing the vehicle miles traveled in their MPO area if they choose to pursue this. Now, identical targets, I mentioned this a moment ago. Amy's going to talk later about the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA's targets that are established, but there's 3 that are identical between the Federal Highway Administration requirements and NHTSA's requirements. I'll explain this here in a minute, but they're the number of fatalities, fatality rate, and number of serious injuries. Now, coordination is a big part of this. We are going around the country right now working with state DOTs, state highway safety offices, and NPO organizations and helping them bring them together to make sure that they're not only communicating with one another, but they're also working on sharing information so that they are collectively setting targets. And so coordination is something that's important. MPOs and state DOTs are required actually to coordinate during the HSIP target setting process. And in most cases, states are already doing this, not because we're out there doing it, but we're out there as well just trying to help them and move in a forward direction. And then there are other stakeholders which we are strongly encouraging agencies to involve, and that, you could represent them as the 4 E's, engineering, enforcement, education, emergency medical services, because they play an important role in defining safety targets and implementing evidence-based countermeasures that will help to achieve those targets by reducing the number and severity of crashes on our roads. Let's see here. There's no easy way to do this. The timeline might be the hardest thing to understand about all of this, but basically this is just sort of showing you as a snapshot, say, from today of what's happening over time. And I'll just take an arrow real quick and show you. Hopefully you guys can all see my arrow. The coordination is already going on around the country for all the states. This is for setting the calendar year 2018 target. By July 1st, the State Highway Safety Office will be submitting their highway safety plan to NHTSA, and 3 of the 5 targets for federal highways will be identified in those. A month or 2 later, the state DOTs will be submitting their HSIP annual report to Federal Highway Administration, and the 3 targets must be identical to the HSP, plus they have the other 2 targets going to be established there. 180 days later, the MPOs make their decision of whether or not to support the state's targets or establish their own. And then in 2019, so we got to get through the calendar year 2018. The information starts coming in, and notice this is at the end of 2019. And you're going to hear this in a few minutes. The timeliness of when data becomes available is one of the biggest challenges here. It takes a long time for us to pull all the information together so that we can start to confidently assess the number of fatal crashes and the number of serious injury crashes that happen in any given year. This starts in about 2019, about the end of the year 2019, and then by March of the following year, the Federal Highway Administration will make a determination as to whether or not the state has met or made significant progress towards their 2018 calendar year target. So I hope that makes sense, but this is kind of the nature of the beast that we're dealing with. Forums for coordination. The Strategic Highway Safety Plan has collaboration structures. There's technical committees and leadership committees, hopefully in each state. There should be lots of involvement from lots of different stakeholders. Performance-based planning and programming, collaboration structures, highway safety plan development structures, safety traffic summits, things like this. Every opportunity that we can think of where we can actually communicate with each other about what are our targets and what are our goals in our state, and what can we do to help to move safety in the right direction. So here's just a general, broad, high-level look at, sort of what we're talking about, the 4th element of our transportation performance management framework. Plans, well, as it relates to safety, there is the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, which is sort of the overarching statewide safety plan that affects everybody. It is something that's updated every 5 years. It identifies both infrastructure and behavioral countermeasures and priorities. The Strategic Highway Safety Plan process is something that is approved by Federal Highway Administration, and is a requirement of a federal, the Highway Safety Improvement Program, which is, comes through the federal aid highway program. On the left-hand side, the Highway Safety Improvement Program is a plan that falls under the SHSP. It's an annual report, and it basically focuses on infrastructure improvements that are prioritized based on the data analysis, saying where is our biggest problems and where can we make the most improvements. And it's something that Federal Highways approves. Amy will talk about the Highway Safety Plan here in a few minutes, and this is something that's also an annual plan, and this is more or less focused on behavioral programs that also play a role in trying to improve highway safety. When it comes to reports, the fifth element of our framework, states have to report annually through their HSIP report. NHTSA receives the statewide, the Highway Safety Annual Report, and this is where we are starting to evaluate this information based on performance management requirements. MPOs report to state DOTs. So those two graphics there are just showing you that the State Highway Safety Office reports to us, but ultimately federal highway, when I say us, I mean the federal government. State DOTs are the the group that works with Federal Highway Administration. The MPOs are dealing with states primarily. Reporting targets for the HSIP. So we expect an overview of general highway safety trends to be documented and identified. In this report, we're going to document the safety performance targets that were established. And then as we move forward in time and we start to have calendar years behind us that were under this performance management process, then we will start to see in those reports the discussion that explains the reasons for the differences between the actual outcomes and targets. And this is trying to get at using an evidence or a data-driven process to project where we believe safety may be going, programming projects to try to push those numbers in a downward direction, and then understanding or evaluating where we were right or where we were wrong and what we're going to do about it. MPO targets are reported to the state DOT, and they're also going to be included in metropolitan transportation plans. Transportation plans that are updated on or after May 27th of 2018. So long-range statewide transportation plans in the metropolitan transportation plans that are updated after this date that have some requirements that apply. So this is going through the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, or the STIP, which is sort of like the master document of what is expected to be built under the Federal Aid Highway Program. It rolls up all the various MPO tips, or the Transportation Improvement Programs, into it. And in that document, that STIP document, they must include a description of how the STIP and TIP contributes to achieving the performance targets in the long-range statewide transportation plan and the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So very, very high-level, complicated process that goes on in the planning level, or the planning world. But this is sort of just giving you an idea that there's more transparency and more declaration of where our targets are and how we intend to achieve improving safety performance, hopefully. Accountability and transparency. Federal Highway Administration are going to be held, or states are going to be held accountable to make significant progress towards the achievement of their HSIP targets. And these elements, or these performance elements, will be made available to the public, and we're going to be increasing transparency through that mechanism. This will help to provide the public and decision makers a better understanding of the federal transportation investment needs and return on investment. That's a very important part, because we want to make sure we're investing the limited resources in the right places so that we can get the best improvement, or the biggest improvement possible. The information in the HSIP reports, which are going to be published on the FHWA's website, will improve the transparency of state fatal and serious injury data, which any of you, if you ever try to get that information, sometimes it's more difficult than we would like it to be. And we will, Federal Highway Administration will be creating a new public website to help communicate sort of the national performance story. NHTSA will also be publishing the state highway safety plans and annual reports on their website as well. In terms of target achievement evaluation, now I want to show you how this all works out. State DOTs have an evaluation by Federal Highways of determining, did you either meet your performance targets, or did you make significant progress? And if you don't, there are some hoops or some repercussions, I guess you could say. It's not a very positive word, but there's some effects that will happen to states if they don't. And let me show you how this works. So of those 5 targets, they have to either meet 4 of them, and or 4 of them have to be better than baseline. If 2 or more of their 5 targets do not either meet their targets or are not better than a baseline, then that means that they were going to be found not having made significant progress. There's going to be additional reporting involved, and the state will lose flexibility for where their highway safety improvement program funds can be spent. Target achievement evaluation. So optional targets, states have the ability to set optional targets, like in NPOs as well. We're not going to be looking at those. And if a state does not meet or make significant progress in achieving their targets for safety performance management, the real kicker is they have to use the obligation authority equal to the HSIP apportionment for the year prior to the target year. And that amount of money can only be spent on highway safety improvement program projects. And then they have to submit an implementation plan with their HSIP about how they're going to get back on track. Why does this matter? What does this mean? Well, states in some cases transfer some of their HSIP money into other areas. And those other areas or other kinds of projects may not be eligible under the HSIP requirements. Well, they'll lose that flexibility if we don't meet or make significant progress towards our targets. And then we have a process where we're going to be letting states know how they did. The data sources that are going to be used, this is another important part of this, is the FARS database, or the Fatal Analysis Reporting System, which is maintained by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. This is where all the highway fatality numbers are collected from all states, and then we publish the annual fatalities through this. This is sort of recognized as the national number. The fatality rate per 100 million vehicle miles traveled is a combination of FARS data and HPMS data. That's the Highway Performance Monitoring System, where we get the travel information. Serious injuries. Now, this is a new one for states. The State Motor Vehicle Crash Database. Talking to a bunch of different states, we find out that they have different issues and challenges with collecting serious injury numbers, and there's a lot of information, a lot more of those than there are fatality crashes. And so there's going to be a big challenge to the states to improve not only their data quality, but also the timeliness of collecting that data, and I'll talk about that with all of you here in a moment, because that's part of the role that you're going to be expected to play in the one way that you can really help states and help us move safety in the right direction. Combination of the State Motor Vehicle Crash Database and HPMS is where we're going to be looking at the serious injury rate. And then you can see the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries combined will come from both the FARS database and the State Motor Vehicle Crash Database. This is the data sources that the federal government will be using to assess the degree of whether a state met their targets or made significant progress. So very quickly, I want to walk you through this, and if you don't mind, I'd like you to try not to look at this whole thing and understand it, because I want to just show this to you line by line. So when we look at a state, after, let's say, somewhere between December and the very early part of December of 2019 or the very early part of the year 2020, we're going to be looking back at what happened in the year 2018. Okay? Remember, those targets will be set this year, and this is 2017. So they will have a baseline performance, and this is basically the 5-year average from 2012 to 2016 of the number of fatalities. They're going to set a target based on a projected rolling average, and then there's going to be actual performance numbers that we'll have once those data sets are completed, and that is, remember, is going to be the 5 years divided by 5. That's why you have a decimal number on a fatality measure. And then basically walking through this to see whether or not, we're going to do this for each one of these rows here. We are not achieving our target here because the actual performance was not better, meaning less than the actual target that was set for 2018. And so the target was not achieved. But this number is actually less than the baseline performance for the years 2012 through 2016. And hopefully this makes sense, because when you see it all together, hopefully it'll make more sense. In terms of fatality rate, the fatality rate neither met the target nor was less than the baseline performance. And therefore, we did not either achieve our target or exceed the baseline. For the number of serious injuries, we did not meet our target, but we did, in this example, exceed the baseline in a positive direction, all below actually. For serious injury rate, same case here. And then for the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, the actual number fell lower than the target. And because 4 of these 5 were found to either have met the target or be better than the baseline, then we determined that the state has met or made significant progress. That's the federal determination, and the state doesn't have to jump through those extra hoops when they're setting their next year's targets. So that's what we're all trying to do from the management perspective. The real perspective, we're trying to save lives and reduce serious injuries. There's no question. From MPOs, there is an effect on MPOs, just in case there's any MPO representatives on the call. From a TMA planning certification or the certification process, I think it happens every 4 or 5 years, we might get involved in looking at whether or not they're repeatedly not achieving their targets, and it could result in things like what's called a federal planning finding. So it's a process where federal government is working directly with the MPOs. So there are some things that could happen, but they're not nearly as significant as far as flexibility of funding is what happens to a state. With the HSP, I'm going to let Amy talk about this, but basically there's a process they'll go through. And I'm just going to skip this slide. I didn't even mean to include this, but Amy will be talking about that. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Jamie, because I think we're going to pull up some poll pods, and then I'm going to come back and talk a little bit more before we hand it over to Amy.
Yeah, thank you very much, George. So as you can see, there is the chat pod over on the left-hand side. We do have a few questions in there already, but please feel free to add some more. I am going to move us over to our first poll break. The chat pod will still be there. So our first question for all of you is, which of the following is not one of FHWA's safety performance management targets? The number of fatalities, the rate of fatalities per 100 million VMT, the number of serious injuries, the rate of serious injuries per 100 million VMT, number of non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized serious injuries, the rate of property damage only crashes, or I don't know, I don't remember. And we'll just give you guys a few minutes to go ahead and fill that out. While we are waiting for the answers to that, George, maybe we'll take the first question out of the chat pod. The first question is that it seems redundant, lots of extra work for state DOTs to report the same information to both FHWA and then again to NHTSA. Is it possible to maybe just pick one federal agency for the reporting?
Great comment. No surprise there from my perspective. It's not as simple as picking an agency to do both. And we can't do that. And that's something that would have to come from Congress. But there are independent organizations that, or well, not independent, but the state highway safety offices, they work very closely with NHTSA, and they have for many, many years, whereas the state DOTs work very closely with the Federal Highway Administration. So even though this duplicative effort and information may appear to be redundant in the sense of a lot of extra work, I don't think it's going to be a lot of extra work. I just think it's going to be, I just think for now it is what it is. So I don't know if I'm really giving you a great answer there, but I don't think it's going to have that big of an impact as what the question might imply. And we can't do anything about it.
Thank you, George. I have gone ahead and closed the poll for you and broadcast the results, so you should be able to see them on your screen if you'd like to go ahead and address those.
So it looks like 3 people got it wrong. The answer is the rate of property damage only crashes. And one clarification here. In the question where it says it's not one of the FHWA safety performance target, it's the states are the ones that set targets. These are the Federal Highway Administration safety performance management measures, okay? There's a important distinction if you're looking at this from a regulatory point of view. But number of fatalities is absolutely one of our performance management measures and a state target that's required, as well as the number of non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized serious injuries combined.
Thank you. It looks like we do have one other question for you. It is, when, month and year, will the FARS and HPMS data for 2018 and 2020 be available from NHTSA and FHWA, respectfully?
Yeah, great question, Rudy. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Would you like me to answer that, George, since it's for the FARS data?
I think it would be great. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry to jump in there. Thanks, Rudolph, for the question. So typically for the FARS data, we release the annual report file in the late fall of each year. So this fall 2017, we'll release our 2016 data. So fall of 2018, we'll release our 2017 data. And then fall of 2019, we'll have our 2018 data and so forth. So obviously, as George mentioned, there is a little bit of a data delay. But generally, fall is the time frame when we aim to have that data available. And George, can you speak to the HPMS question?
I can try. So generally, the HPMS data comes out after the year in which it was collected, in the year after. So 2016 data, I don't know exactly what part of the year it comes out. I know it takes some time, but it should be coming out sooner than later this year for last year, Rudy. From a federal perspective, both for FARS and HPMS, there's really not a 2 or 3 year delay in our data. But when we talk to individual states, we are finding that they themselves, especially when they're talking about serious injuries, are experiencing or expecting that there may be more than a year delay before they can actually generate a complete picture of the serious injury problem.
And just add on, this is Amy. I do believe the HPMS data, don't quote me on this, but I believe it was the 2015 information was released this past January, to give you a general sense.
Okay, so just over a year late, or after.
It does look like we also had one additional question come in, and I'm not sure, you can let me know if you'd like to hold off on this one if you address it in the next section of the presentation. But the question is, what is being done to require or ensure that local police and sheriff's offices submit their crash reports to the state database?
Okay, Jamie, I'd like to hold that question until after the next few slides because it's a great question and really one of the big focuses of what I'm about to talk about.
Perfect. Sounds great. And I will turn it back over to you to move forward.
Thanks, Jamie. So many of you, if you represent a local agency, may be saying to yourself, what does this have to do with me? Well, understand that I work for the federal government, the Federal Highway Administration. We work directly with our state partner, the state DOTs, and these regulations or the legislation, the law, is designed to hold the state accountable for safety performance, right? But their safety performance accountability is to all roads open to public travel. They don't have control over federal property roads. They don't have control over tribal roads. They don't have control over local roads. And hopefully many of you on this call are representing those organizations that do have that kind of a responsibility over those roads. And that means then that the states are going to be relying heavily upon you to do what you can to contribute to the overall safety performance, both the target achievement, but more broadly, forget the regulation. This goes without saying, I hope, but states and the feds and everybody in every level of organization of government, we do heavily depend on local agencies to contribute to improving safety performance, because when we look at the number of fatalities and serious injuries that occur, there's a huge number of these happening on our rural roads that are under local jurisdiction. That's not to put any onus or burden on you guys. It's not to say that there's anything wrong with what you've been doing. It's just saying that the magnitude and the size of your network responsibility is far greater in almost every case than the state's roadway network. So you have a big role to play in the projects and the work that you're going to be doing going forward. I think that the states are going to be trying to work with you guys to help you guys implement projects or safety elements in your projects that can help to contribute to improving safety. Now, how do we do this? Well, somehow, I hope that you all have opportunities fairly regularly to be involved, to be communicating both with the state and or nearby MPOs about what are the local safety problems in your area, what are the strategies that are being contemplated, and as soon as these targets get established and moving forward, hopefully this will be very clearly communicated and available to everyone at all levels of government in each state. And by being familiar with these, then we start to see where we think things need to move. And then that's going to help us to understand, well, what kinds of projects or what types of elements of projects do we need to implement to help with that. And if you don't have either that level of expertise in your organization, then we would encourage you guys to reach out to anyone and everyone you possibly can to seek training. A couple of suggestions of where I think there's a great opportunity for the local organization or local agency level to make a big impact. Federal Highway Administration has both publications on our website. You can Google this on what's called low-cost safety improvements. There's a lot of evidence and examples of states that have done things that have cost very, very low cost or local agencies and gotten a big return on that investment. And those are the kinds of things that we believe, especially at the local level, they may be perceived as not only being affordable, but the kind of thing that you want to be trying to focus on so that you can start to move the numbers not only within the road network that you're responsible for, but also to contributing to the statewide performance improvement. Systemic safety treatments or safety improvements, if you're not familiar with that concept, again, you can go on Google, type in FHWA, and then systemic safety. We have reports out there. We've got a systemic safety improvement selection tool. That's a guidebook that would be very good for you guys if you're not very familiar with this to walk through, I'd say everyone, so that you can understand in some cases, in fact, I'm going to say in many cases, we probably need to be doing things systemically when we're out working in an area. If we can put a little bit extra money or a little bit money into something differently that has by all evidence, the ability to reduce fatality potential or serious injury potential, then we want to make those corrections as we go, because the idea is we want to stop the fatalities from happening before they happen. We're sort of moving beyond only trying to fix safety where we have obvious proof through many years of historical evidence that there was a crash problem. We're still going to be fixing those areas too. But all of our roads have the opportunity for improvements, and in some cases, some more than others. And this is where the systemic safety concept comes in. And then anyone has ever heard me speak before, you know I'm not going to talk without mentioning the word roundabout. I'm just going to say this. By every statistic I can come up with, there's probably no single better improvement. It may not be the most cost-effective in all cases as far as the initial cost, but putting a roundabout in replacement of an intersection has the ability to save lives. And there's just about nothing a road organization can do to have a more positive impact as a result of a project than something like installing a roundabout. I'm almost going to put it up there with the seatbelt if we could just build all of our intersections as roundabouts as far as the effect on safety performance. Now, the biggest challenge, I've been around to a bunch of different states, talking with them and the MPOs, trying to work on this coordination and get them to the point where they're ready to set their targets. And I'm hearing over and over and over, we have a major problem. We don't have the ability to make or to compel our state, the local agencies in our state, the tribal lands and organizations, the federal land management agencies, and then the local law enforcement. We can't just make them give us good quality, accurate data quickly. And in some cases, we've heard it takes 2 to 2.5 years to actually receive all of the serious injury and or fatal crash information. And then there's a lot of work that goes into compiling that information and making sure it's accurate. And so that timeliness and that lag and time delay is a major challenge for states, because they have to set a target based on the most recent information, and they're going to be measured on information in some cases that is not available to them at the time when they're setting their targets. And so when it comes to this information and the access to this information, I think that you guys will all be hearing from states through your state DOTs, through your state highway safety offices, through your sort of in the hierarchy of law enforcement organizations, whether it's a state highway patrol or whomever. There's going to be a big push to figure out what it is that needs to be done to ensure that crash reports are accurate, so that it doesn't take time to go back and find out whether the mistakes are and then fix them, that they are made available and shared in a timely fashion to reduce any kind of delay. And there's probably going to be a lot of effort in looking at the consistency of the information coming in from various agencies, so that the definition of a serious injury, one of the things that the Federal Highway Administration established through these rules, there is only one definition now. And in some cases, we still have different organizations within a state that may interpret a serious injury differently than another. And so going back to the question that's in the chat pod, what is being done to require local police and sheriff offices to submit their crash reports to the state databases? I don't play a role in that, meaning I representing Federal Highway Administration. I don't know that we have any role in the requirement part of that. As far as the insurance that they're doing this, we're talking about it. We're talking about it with lots of people, and we're trying to get this information out as much as we possibly can, so that everyone understands this is going to be one of the biggest challenges states are going to be dealing with. And the sooner we can get good, accurate, timely, and complete and consistent information, the better off we're going to be in not only monitoring our safety performance, but also having the ability to direct our limited resources to where we can do something about it. And that's going to end up, hopefully, saving more and more lives than what we are doing now, and reducing serious injuries. A couple of quick things I'm gonna share with you guys. You can download these slides. We've got Federal Highway Administration has a great website on transportation performance management for safety. There's a lot of information there. There's a web link I've just shared with you, or you can just Google FHWA Safety Performance Management, and this website should come up in one of the top picks. If you are interested, we've also developed a 2-day workshop, and this is getting into more of the details about what I just covered. But this would be something, if you're interested, to talk with your state DOT about and seeing how to go about bringing that to your state. And it's offered through the National Highway Institute. I put their web link there. They're a sub-organization of Federal Highway Administration. And there's a couple more web links here for you guys to go and look at more information on safety performance management. I hope you're all familiar with the Highway Safety Improvement Program. what Amy's about to talk about related to the highway safety plan, and then performance management in general. So with that, I'm going to step back, mute my phone, and turn it back over to you, Jamie. Thank you.
Thank you again, George. At this time, we will take questions again through the chat pod. If you do have any, please type them over on the left-hand side. We do have another poll break for you. Our first question is, what can locals do to assist states with crash data reporting? Is it improve data accuracy, provide timely data, ensure data consistency, all of the above, none of the above, or I don't know and I don't remember? At the same time, you can fill out that second poll question, which will help our second speaker, Amy, know how much you guys already are familiar with NHTSA. So are you familiar with NHTSA and their role in transportation, yes or no? Okay, so it does look like at this point in time that everyone has taken a few minutes to go ahead and fill these out. Amy, it looks like we have about 78% of people who are familiar with NHTSA, but we do have about 20% who are not aware.
Okay, thanks, Jamie.
Yep. And at this point, it also looks like, George, for you, that everyone got the question correct about what locals can do to assist with crash data reporting. So if you have any final thoughts on that poll question.
Nope, I've taken too much time already, so I'm going to turn it over to you and Amy.
Perfect. We do not have any questions that came into the chat pod, so we're going to move right over to the presentation and let Amy do her side.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you to your colleagues at the National Center for Rural Road Safety, and thank you, George, and a special thanks to all of the 100 participants listening in today. So we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about the requirements from the behavioral perspective, specifically from NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And since about a quarter of you weren't as familiar with NHTSA, I am going to just take a few brief moments throughout my presentation to give some background on NHTSA. Okay, so a quick overview of what we'll discuss today. Again, we'll just take a few moments to give you some perspective on NHTSA. As with anything, NHTSA is a data-driven agency. So I want to provide some latest crash data as just an overview and to provide context of our discussion. Then we'll talk about the state highway safety programs and their planning processes and how locals can become involved and help with that process. And then we'll, again, speak to the behavioral highway safety performance management requirements with an emphasis on behavioral. We'll touch briefly on NHTSA grant funding and end with stakeholder involvement and coordination. And just, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for locals to be involved and aware of this process. George mentioned at the onset of his presentation that DOTs need the help of every local agency to achieve the mission of reducing fatalities. The same holds true with state highway safety offices. It's a collective effort, and everybody has a role to play here. Okay. Again, for those of you not as familiar with NHTSA, or the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, we are a modal administration within the U.S. Department of Transportation. We're a sister agency to the Federal Highway Administration, and in short, our mission is to keep people safe on America's roadways. We do that through a variety of factors. We help enforce vehicle standards, and we work closely with state and local governments to reduce deaths, injuries, and economic losses from motor vehicle crashes. Okay. And I wanted just to take a brief moment here on the larger perspective of NHTSA. In 2016, we released On the Road to Zero. And we have three main lanes that we call where we're trying to reduce fatalities. One being proactive vehicle safety, the second advanced safety technologies. I'm sure every one of you has heard of autonomous vehicles and just the fast and furiousness of how that technology is evolving. But the latter, addressing human factors, is the one where I think each one of us on this call today can have the most impact on. And we know that the road to zero, it's a long-term vision, and it will take time, and it will take a lot of hard work. But to achieve that, again, we just need the help of everyone, coming up with innovative strategies and doing what we need to do to save lives. Okay, so here's just a quick map of NHTSA. NHTSA has 10 regional offices located throughout the country that work with states and local agencies to support our mission. And you can find this information in the latter slide that I will show where to get this contact information. But I just wanted to give you a quick visual of our regional offices and where they are located. And to find specifically where your NHTSA regional office is, that is available on our website here, and I included this link that you can use when you download the presentation. You simply just type in your state name, and you'll also be given your State Highway Safety Office contact information if you're not aware of that. Okay, so switching to data. So 2015 was an unfortunate year in terms of the fatalities were increasing. We lost over 35,000 people on our roadways in 2015 alone. It's a disturbing trend, and as you can see, that's just the top of the pyramid. There's over nearly 2 million injury crashes, 4.5 million property damage crashes, and the economic cost is estimated to be, $242 billion. So I think we can all agree this is certainly it's an epidemic that we are all working very hard to address. And unfortunately, the upward trend of increasing fatalities is not slowing down. This chart here is a graphic by the NHTSA regions that shows the estimated percentage change from 2015 to 2016 fatalities. So the slide that I just showed you where we had over 35,000 fatalities was from 2015. And here is showing the estimated percentage increase that we are projecting in 2016. So again, I'll just pause for a moment so you can just take a quick look where your state may lie. We don't have this yet broken out by state, but we hope to have that information within the coming months. Okay. And for all of our data resources, through George's presentation, he mentioned the FARS, the Fatal Analysis and Reporting System. That is available on NHTSA's website, and I've included the links for you to access. And the one I want to point out, the state traffic safety information, that contains state-specific data, and I think you'll find that very helpful. Okay, so switching gears to state highway safety programs. Every state has a highway safety program designed to reduce fatalities. And a state governor has to appoint a governor's representative for highway safety. And those are the persons that we work with on a day-to-day basis to administer the Behavioral Highway Safety Grant Program through the State Highway Safety Office. And every year, state highway safety offices conduct extensive planning and comprehensive problem identification, and ultimately that ends with the development of a highway safety plan and says how they are going to essentially spend their money to improve highway safety. Okay, and this is a map of the State Highway Safety Offices locations throughout the country. There is an assumption that all the State Highway Safety Offices fall within the Departments of Transportation, but that is not correct. As you can see here, the states shaded in green do have highway safety offices that fall within their Department of Transportation, but as you can see also many states have highway safety offices that fall within their public safety agencies, some are independent agencies, and some are within state police. So it does present a little bit of a challenge in terms that it's not uniform in terms of our audience and outreach. So back to the highway safety planning process. It's a continual process, and at any given point, states are, developing current plans, implementing existing projects, and evaluating past projects. You can see, though, really the most critical part is to define the problem identification, involve safety partners. This is an opportunity. This process varies by state, but typically beginning in January to February of each year, most state highway safety offices begin the work of soliciting projects for the outward year. And there's coordination with the DOT folks, They develop their performance targets. They prioritize and select strategies based on their problem ID and how they want to achieve their targets. And they submit plans and so forth, and it just continues. So the Highway Safety Plan is a culmination of the state highway safety planning. It's an annual document. It's a critical document that demonstrates linkages between data, planning, strategies, performance, and ultimately funding. A state highway safety plan needs to have a description of every fund used to improve behavioral traffic safety. And the highway safety plan needs performance measures in order to receive what we call the Section 402 state and community highway safety grants. Okay, continuing on with the HSP, the Highway Safety Plan, it defines the state's highway safety program. It does serve as the application for all NHTSA highway safety grants, and it helps communicate the vision and the program direction to outside partners and their constituents. It also establishes and identifies a strong data-based decision-making process. And lastly, it provides documentation for the current safety levels for each of the performance measure areas, which we'll discuss here in a bit, annual performance targets, and a justification why each target is appropriate, why it's data-driven. And for those of you who are not familiar with their state highway safety plans, these can also be found online. Many states do post their highway safety plans within their own agency websites, but not all do. So you can use this link here to find your state highway safety plan. The current plan that we have is the 2017 Highway Safety Plan, and states are currently working on developing their 2018 Highway Safety Plan that's submitted to NHTSA July 1st. Okay. So within the plan, I mentioned performance measures are one of the required elements. For performance measures, states are to report targets annually. The Highway Safety Plan, as I mentioned, includes a description of all funds used to improve behavioral highway traffic safety. And in order to receive Section 402 funding, again, as I mentioned before, states need to have 15 core measures, and we'll discuss what those are here in a second. Okay. So here are the core measures required for NHTSA funding. The ones that I've identified to the left are the ones that are common to the DOT HSIP plans. Again, they include the number of fatalities, the total number of fatalities, the rate of fatalities, the number of serious injuries. In addition to that, state highway safety offices also submit to NHTSA measures and targets for the unrestrained or unbelted passenger vehicle occupants, impaired drivers, speeding-related fatalities, motorcyclist fatalities, both helmeted and unhelmeted, young drivers, pedestrians, and bicyclist fatalities. And State Highway Safety Office has been doing this for some time. They began voluntarily submitting these targets several years ago, and this became a requirement in 2014 with their 2014 plan. Okay, so some other required measures. In addition to the ones I mentioned, states also have to submit their observed seatbelt use rate. And for grant activities, we don't require targets, but states report to us the number of seatbelt citations, the number of impaired driving arrests, and the number of speeding citations issued during grant-funded enforcement activities. Setting safety targets. Before a state can set a safety target, you begin by documenting what's currently known as the baseline. And this is not to be mistaken for the official federal highway baseline where they use to calculate target achievement. NHTSA just refers to this as the current safety levels. And this really serves as a point of reference for which a state can measure progress. And states have flexibility to select the baseline periods that are most appropriate for them. And again, just to emphasize here, the baselines submitted in the Highway Safety Plan are not the same as the official baselines used for FHWA target assessment. Okay? And again, I mentioned targets need to be data-driven. That is hugely critical. Evidence-based targets are established from trend analysis, the anticipated level of effort and situational factors, which could be many, such as economic conditions, demographics, vehicle miles traveled, legislative changes, and many other factors. This information will help to guide your states to focus on areas that are likely to have the meaningful impacts on highway safety. And this is a point I really want to emphasize here, is target setting is really just the end result of doing a detailed problem identification, identifying where the problem areas are, how to best leverage the resources that you have available to put them on projects that will have a meaningful impact on highway safety. The performance measures guide investments and programs to achieve state goals or their annual targets. Okay, so additional performance measures. The performance measures that we've discussed were developed by NHTSA in partnership with the Governor's Highway Safety Association. It represents the state highway safety offices. And they address the core safety areas, but they don't address all the possible highway safety problem areas. For example, in the list I mentioned earlier, you didn't see measures for drug-impaired driving or distracted driving. And NHTSA works with states to develop supplemental measures of performance for emerging highway safety areas, such as the two I mentioned. Okay, so again, just to emphasize, what are the performance measure requirements from NHTSA? So performance measures have to provide a documentation of the current safety levels, which is sometimes referred to as a baseline, an annual performance target, and again, a justification for why each target is data-driven, and we ask for a discussion of how the factors that influence the performance target selection. And this process for selecting countermeasure strategies and projects should and hopefully allow the state to meet its annual targets. Okay, and to emphasize here again, the identical targets, NHTSA and the Federal Highway Administration did collaborate to harmonize performance measures. Again, they are fatalities, fatality rate, and serious injuries to ensure the highway safety community has a uniform measure of progress. Performance targets for these three measures must be identical to the state DOT targets that are reported in the Highway Safety Improvement Annual Report. Okay, so just to briefly talk about NHTSA grant funding, to just give you some context for those who aren't familiar with NHTSA. NHTSA has several grant programs, the largest most being the Section 402 State and Community Highway Safety Grant Program. This was established back in 1966 as a formula grant program. And for states to qualify for Section 402 funding, states again must submit to NHTSA an annual highway safety plan by July 1. Again, that identifies highway safety problems, it establishes the performance targets, documents an evidence-based enforcement plan, and describes strategies and projects supported by data to reduce traffic crashes. And this table that I've included here is the authorized amount in the current transportation bill, or the FAST Act, for all of the states and territories that it would be eligible to receive Section 402 grants, just to give you some context. In addition to the Section 402 grants that I just spoke of, NHTSA also has Priority Safety Program grants, or Section 405. These are incentive grant programs for the state for the key highway safety areas that include occupant protection, state traffic safety information system improvement, or traffic record grants, they're often referred to. We have grants for impaired driving. Within that, we have grants for 24/7 sobriety programs, ignition interlock. We have grants for distracted driving, motorcyclist safety. We have grants also for states that have graduated driver's licensing laws, and grants non-motorized, which is a pedestrian and bicyclist fatality program. And here as well, you can see the authorized funding levels for the Section 405 grants to give you, again, some context of the funding that is available to all the 50 states and eligible territories. Okay. So coordination and collaboration. That really is the key point, I think, for local agencies where they can become involved. I mentioned earlier the Highway Safety Plan. It's a continual overlapping process, but typically within beginning the February timeframe, state highway safety offices are actively working and developing their future year highway safety plan. Many states hold different meetings and forums for coordination. So I would encourage you to, if you're not familiar with your state highway safety office, to find out, who they are, where they are, get plugged in to the extent possible that you can to help in that development process. Each state highway safety office also has their requirements in terms of grant applications and sub-recipients as such, in addition to the NHTSA requirements. And So coordination, again, is just so key in collaborating with the partners involved. Coordination and collaboration really does increase the likelihood of making progress, achieving targets with ultimate goal of saving lives. And collaboration enables individuals to work together to achieve a common purpose, again, which is saving lives. So to end with really the value and emphasis on performance measures, it is a process to help guide project selection for projects that will have meaningful impacts on highway safety. It does help, performance measures do help rather augment the state highway safety planning process. They help direct resources to where they're most needed. We understand in light of rising fatalities, and there's certainly resource constraints, performance measures and targets help direct the resources to where they're most needed. It helps connect the targets to action and meaningful results. Performance measures also increase accountability and transparency. They help evaluate the safety program progress for states. And they also help communicate priorities and results and the importance of traffic safety. And this, for a fun read, if anybody's interested, is the regulation that guides NHTSA's grant programs. Included here is a link if you're interested for the current transportation bill. Just to give you some context of what the state highway safety offices are required to do in order to receive funding. And again, if you're a local agency or if you're a local subrecipient of highway safety office grants, I do think it's helpful to know the requirements that states have to meet to ensure grant or to receive grant funding. But again, the key here is that projects need to be data-driven. So to the extent possible, if your local agency, if your project is data-driven, if it's innovative, that certainly will, I think, help. So that is quickly, I know we're getting near the end of our time, so I quickly went through our presentation. So I guess I'll just pause here for a moment and we'll see if there's any questions.
Perfect. Thank you very much. At this time, as Amy said, we will take questions over in the chat pod if anyone has those. We do have another poll for all of you as well. So which of the following are behavioral highway safety performance measures? Unrestrained passenger vehicle occupant fatalities, all seat positions, fatalities in crashes involving a driver or motorcycle operator with a BAC of .08 and above, speeding-related fatalities, motorcyclist fatalities, unhelmeted motorcycle fatalities, drivers aged 20 or younger involved in fatal crashes, pedestrian fatalities, bicyclist fatalities, all of the above. And I believe there's a none of the above on here as well. And then I don't know, I don't remember. So we'll just take a few seconds for you guys to go ahead and fill that out. And again, this is our last question and answer session. So if anyone has any questions for either of our speakers, please go ahead and put those into the chat pod.
Jamie, this is George. Just maybe while we're waiting to see if anyone's, looks like Sam's putting a question in maybe. After this is done, if anybody has questions and they need to reach somebody like either Amy or myself or somebody within, say, Federal Highway Administration or NHTSA, besides going to the websites, every state has a local division office from the Federal Highway Administration. If you can't go anywhere else, try to find their phone number, call them, and ask them, say, I need to know more about safety performance management. Who can I talk to? We'll find an answer and find a person for you, whether it's within NHTSA or within Federal Highways. And I'm sure if you call the NHTSA regional offices, they do the same. So.
Yes, absolutely, George. I would encourage you. And I can't recall if we share our contact information, but NHTSA also has 10 regional offices throughout the country who would be more than happy to answer any questions. So it looks like for the question, great job, everyone. The answer is all of the above. As you can see, just to reemphasize that NHTSA does require performance measures for each of these areas that ultimately feed into the total fatality measure. Some states may have an issue with pedestrian fatalities, whereas some don't. So that's why, each state is so different, and it's just important to look at the data to see where the problem do specifically lie within your state.
Thank you very much. I am going to go ahead and move on to our learning outcomes. Oh, nope, it looks like our question did come through. So the question that we have in the chat pod is, the data analysis is very macroscopic. If we are going to make improvements on the road, we need much more microscopic information. So I guess that was more of a comment than a question, but do either of you have any additional comments about that?
Sure. This is Amy again from NHTSA. I could not agree more. Certainly from NHTSA, we are a federal agency, so we obviously report on national data, and we do certainly break out by state data. But I completely agree that data at the very local level is hugely important, and that's why I can't. There's a gentleman who asked a question earlier during George's presentation about, how do we best ensure local police departments and sheriff offices submit their crash reports. While that's outside really the regulatory authority of our agency, it is crucial, to the extent possible that states can work with their locals to get this data, have that detailed analysis at the very localized level.
Yeah, this is George. I couldn't agree more as well to everything you just said, Amy. And as far as the question goes, I think if we take a step back, and this is just me talking, and look at the big picture, this is a very important movement that I believe is going to result from something like the performance management regulations that have been put into effect. We are very, very quickly seeing the world of designing highways, prioritizing roadway projects or transportation facilities, and then how we're constructing them, to moving towards performance. And the high-level numbers, the macroscopic numbers, if you will, Sam, that is part of knowing where we need to sort of put attention, perhaps funding, but it cannot be done without individuals that are both skilled in using informational tools or predictive tools to understand each element of our decision making. What is it doing for either helping to reduce fatalities and serious injuries, or possibly not doing, and so in time, I believe our new generations of engineers and some of our existing engineers out there that are designers on projects, we're going to see a challenge for them to very quickly start to become fluent in the use of these new informational tools. The Highway Safety Manual that AASHTO's put out is a great start for anyone wanting to know how to focus on a specific project. And we're going to be moving, and it's going to be hard, but we can all do this, and it's important that we do this because 35,000 plus fatalities last year is just unacceptable.
Thank you both very much. It does look like we may have one more comment coming in again through the chat pod. So I'll address that right after we go through these learning outcomes again, just for time considerations. In this webinar, you have learned to identify FHWA's safety performance management requirements, to list ways that local partners can help achieve compliance with these requirements, to identify the 3 critical roles locals play in crash reporting, and to identify behavioral highway safety performance management requirements for state highway safety offices and their impacts for a local agency audience. I do want to thank our speakers, both of them again, very much for taking the time out today to go over this information for us, and especially for addressing how this does impact the local agencies. And it does look like we have that last question coming in now. It says 27% of the fatalities are between the infrastructure and the user. How do we find out what the key safety hazards are?
George, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I was trying to unmute my phone there. How do we find out? I don't know that there is a single answer. Are we trying? I would say there are tremendous amounts of people, time, dollars, and effort, both officially and unofficially, of folks trying to whittle down the available data to something that can show us somewhat convincingly that we know where those interrelationships are, and more importantly, what is it we can do about it. The Highway Safety Manual, again, is something that is, I think, very important to this conversation. The NCHRP, or the National Cooperative Highway Research Program, has a document that is called Report 600. It is basically a major effort on the human factors guidelines, and that particular document has gone a long way to try to relate from the human side, the user, to the infrastructure types of things and how they interrelate. It's a big field, and there's a long way to go there, but there's a lot of effort trying. And yeah, I see you. You know I was going to plug the human factors guidelines, so appreciate your comments and questions there.
Thank you all again very much for joining us today. We do have another webinar coming up April 4th from 11 to 12:30 Mountain Time. This one will be on converting paved roads from unpaved roads, and we'll discuss an NHI report that was released. As we mentioned earlier, all of our webinars are archived and available on our website. This one should be up within the next few days. It will have not only the streaming video, but also the PDF version of today's PowerPoint presentation. We do have a few training videos also available on our website and our YouTube link. We have a brand new one that is called Introduction to Road Safety Audits on Tribal Lands. This one is available on our website right now. It has not been formally sent out or marketed. That will happen at the beginning of next week through our email distribution list and through all of our social media. So if you'd like to check that out before it becomes well marketed, you're more than welcome to. We also have an Introduction to Road Safety Culture available as well. If you have any further questions about today's webinar, you can feel free to contact George or Amy at the following email addresses showing on your screen. You can also contact us at the Safety Center via our 800 number or our email address. And also look at our website as well. So thank you one more time to George and Amy. We really do appreciate you taking the time out today to present to our audience. So thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.